Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. White House Budget Director Russell Vought testifies before a House subcommittee about the president's fiscal year 2026 budget request and the budget reconciliation bill, the one called the One Big Beautiful Bill, dealing with taxes and spending. He disputes a new Congressional Budget Office, CBO, prediction that the House-passed version will add $2.4 trillion to the federal budget deficit over 10 years. The Senate is on a path to confirm the second highest position in the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, vice chair for supervision, who oversees banks. Tariffs on imported steel and aluminum double from 25% to 50% under a presidential proclamation. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick goes before a Senate subcommittee defending the president's tariff policies. FAA Acting Administrator Christopher Rocheleau tells a House panel about the administration's plans to completely rebuild the nation's air traffic control operations. President Trump says he spoke by phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin about the war in Ukraine and also nuclear talks with Iran. And the U.S. vetoes a United Nations Security Council resolution to call for a ceasefire in the war in Gaza. All that and more ahead on Washington Today. And we start with Russell Vought, director of OMB, the White House Office of Management and Budget, testifying before a House Appropriations Subcommittee about the president's fiscal year 2026 budget request and also the budget reconciliation bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill, as they're calling it. The version has passed the House, and the Senate is about to take it up.
Under the previous administration, government spending aggressively turned against our citizens, who saw their tax dollars used to fund cultural Marxism, the Green New Scam, foreign projects unaligned with American interests, and even our own invasion. Every agency became a tool of the left. Under President Trump, those days are over. The president's fiscal year 26 budget, in tandem with the One Big Beautiful Bill and other tools this administration has at its disposal, will finally end the era of unchecked federal spending, stop the weaponization of government, and turbocharge economic growth. The fiscal year 26 budget puts American citizens first and shifts the destructive paradigm that ruled Washington for decades, that we could only fund national security and border security if we massively funded woke and weaponized bureaucracy coveted by the left. The president's budget reduces non-defense spending by $163 billion, 22% below current year levels and the lowest non-defense spending since 2017 if adjusted for inflation. All while we protect funding for national defense, homeland security, veterans, seniors, law enforcement, and infrastructure. Over 10 years, such restraint would generate trillions in savings necessary for delivering on the president's goal of balancing the budget. The budget also incorporates the historic increases for defense and border security that will be provided by the One Big Beautiful Bill currently making its way through Congress. In combination with base appropriations, the bill is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to revolutionize our nation's defense capabilities and protect our American sovereignty, providing the first-ever trillion-dollar defense budget and the single largest investment in border security in our nation's history. The bill also improves our fiscal trajectory by reducing mandatory spending, as confirmed today by CBO, by roughly $1.7 trillion, the largest mandatory spending reduction in history, ending waste, fraud, and abuse, and preserving critical programs. Along with the extension of President Trump's 2017 tax cuts and the new tax policies provided for additional relief to working and middle-class families and our seniors, the bill will drive massive economic growth and raise GDP, increasing wealth across the board.
Russell Vought is director of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget at the White House. That was part of his opening statement at a House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing today. The story from ABC News, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, a massive tax and immigration bill to fund much of President Donald Trump's agenda, could add $2.4 trillion to the deficit over the next decade, according to a new analysis out Wednesday from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. The CBO released updated estimates on legislation as focus turns to the Senate, where a handful of Republican members are expressing concerns about the deficit and changes to Medicaid. The Budget Office is projecting 10.9 million more people will be uninsured in 2034 because of changes to health care. Budget Office also estimates the bill will cut taxes by $3.7 trillion and cut spending by $1.2 trillion. The CBO has not yet completed analysis of the macroeconomic effects of the bill. That was from the ABC News article. Back to the hearing with OMB Director Russell Vought. Questions about all this from Congressman Mark Pocan, Democrat of Wisconsin.
You support the efforts of DOGE, I understand. Is the federal government currently spending less this year than it did last year?
No, it's not.
Great. And part of that is because you've sent us a rescission package worth $9 billion that goes after Big Bird and Cookie Monster, but you've added $200 billion to defense and homeland security. You've also, the bill that you just said the White House supports is going to add, depending who you talk to, $2.4 trillion to $5 trillion to the national debt. It's going to make somewhere between 11 and 16 million people lose their health care. I know you said on a Sunday morning show no one will lose coverage as a result of this bill. Is that still your standing?
Which one of those would you like me to take?
The one I just asked. I'll ask it again. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
The bill does not lead to less coverage for Medicaid beneficiaries. It has improper payments, and it leads to the fact that people who are ineligible because they're illegal aliens or because they're unwilling to work.
Do not get federal dollars from Medicaid, correct?
That's not true. They get them in many different states, including California.
Federal dollars?
Federal dollars using provider.
State can provide it. Are there any federal dollars?
Congressman,
how many federal dollars then, since you're the expert, how many federal dollars go to funding illegal aliens getting Medicaid?
Congressman, because of the money laundering.
It's a number. It's a question. It's a number. How many dollars go to illegal aliens, federal dollars for Medicaid? It's a simple question.
It is not actually a simple question because Congress.
All you secretaries have a hard time with simple questions lately. I got to tell you, it is a simple. But you were saying that that's true. So we will, if you can get back to us with that amount, how's that sound? How much federal dollars?
I'm happy to get back to you about how the bill works and getting rid of the money laundering schemes that
a lot of people disagree with you. The CBO disagrees with your analysis. Yale and Penn said 13.7 million people will lose health insurance. You also said this won't increase the debt. Is that correct? The bill
will not increase the debt. It will lead to reduced deficits.
The Cato Institute disagrees with you. Moody's disagrees. The CBO disagrees. Senator Hawley and Senator Rand and Senator Collins disagree. Elon Musk disagrees. Virtually everyone on this side of the aisle. So you're saying everyone is wrong, but you are the right one, that this does not increase the debt?
I'm saying that all the watchdogs, including the Congressional Budget Office, use a skewed vision of a view of what the baseline is.
They were less than a few percent wrong last time on your tax bill when they predicted it almost dead on. So you're saying this time there's significant changes and they don't know what's going on and only you do. Is that correct?
I'm stating that they use a baseline.
So you disagree with the Cato Institute?
Yes.
And Moody's?
Yes.
And Senator Hawley?
Senator Hawley has a view as to the Medicaid programs that we are working with to articulate why we believe that these reforms do not hurt the beneficiaries that are involved.
I'm over time.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Edwards.
Congressman Mark Pocan, Democrat of Wisconsin, questioning the OMB Director Russell Vought at today's Appropriations Subcommittee hearing. Elon Musk, the former head of DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, continuing to post his opposition to the budget reconciliation bill, today writing on X, his platform. A new spending bill should be drafted that doesn't massively grow the deficit and increase the debt ceiling by $5 trillion. Call your senator, call your congressman. Bankrupting America is not okay. Kill the bill. Elon Musk posted on Tuesday, in November next year, we fire all politicians who betrayed the American people. Today, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, was asked about that.
Elon Musk was sort of alluding to electoral threats against Republicans who voted for the Big Beautiful Bill. I mean, he spent $290 million in the 2024 election. How much of a threat is this to keeping the majority in 2024?
Look, let me just address the Elon controversy and tell you that I consider Elon a friend. He's obviously brilliant. I just told you we credit him with all the big changes with DOGE and everything else. It's curious to me what happened this week. And full disclosure, Elon and I had a great conversation, about a half-hour-long talk on Monday this week, Monday morning. And we talked about the big, beautiful bill, because I think he was trying to make a joke a couple of days earlier. It can't be big and beautiful. And I started the conversation, oh, yes, it can, my friend. It's very beautiful. So we talked about all the record level of savings. My friends, no government in the history of mankind has ever cut $1.6 trillion in a piece of legislation. We're doing that here. The extraordinary level of savings and the historic level of tax cuts at the same time, and all these great policy prescriptions. And I talked to Elon through all that and explained to him what we're doing, and that this is just the beginning of a long process of making government more efficient and effective, of cutting wasteful spending, fraud, and abuse. And you can't do it all in one bill. It took Congress decades to get to this situation. It's going to take us a little while to get out of it. But we have a very specific plan to do that. And Elon was encouraged by that conversation. We had it was a very friendly, very fruitful conversation together. And he and I talked about the midterm elections. And he said, well, I'm going to help. We got to make sure that the Republicans keep the House majority. We can't have the president impeached, which is what the Democrats would do on day one, as we all well know. And we've got to continue this. The Trump administration needs 4 years to do all this reform, not 2 years. The Biden administration, Biden-Harris, made such a disaster of every metric of public policy, it's going to take us more than one bill to fix it all. Elon and I left on a great note. We were texting one another, happy texts, Monday. And then yesterday, 24 hours later, he does a 180 and he comes out and opposes the bill. And it surprised me, frankly. And I don't take it personal. We don't take it personal. Policy differences are not personal. I think he's flat wrong. I think he's way off on this, and I've told him as much, and I've said it publicly and privately. I'm very consistent in that. But am I concerned about the effect of this on the midterms? I'm not. Let me tell you why. Because when the big, beautiful bill is done and signed into law, every single American is going to do better. This bill is geared for middle and working class Americans, and they are going to feel the effects of it, and they're going to feel it before the midterm elections. So I have no concern whatsoever. I'm absolutely convinced that we're going to win the midterms and grow the House majority because we're delivering for the American people and fulfilling our campaign promises, and we'll see how that happens.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, at a news conference today with other House Republican leaders. Another ABC News article, Senate Republicans will try to chart a path forward for the One Big Beautiful Bill Act during a series of meetings on Wednesday, including one where President Donald Trump will work to shore up support for the mega bill that advances his legislative agenda. Republican members of the powerful Senate Finance Committee will go to the White House to meet with Trump at 4 p.m. Eastern Wednesday. Multiple White House and Hill sources confirm. Finance Committee is responsible for writing the tax policy components of the bill, including the extension of the Trump 2017 tax cuts, a key priority for the package. Senate Republicans are separately expected to meet behind closed doors at a conference on Wednesday to discuss the parameters of the bill as a group. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune has so far not made clear what his strategy will be for moving the package through the upper chamber. As things currently stand, Thune can only afford to lose 3 of the GOP members to pass the package, and right now he has more members than that expressing serious doubts about the bill. That was from ABC News. Meanwhile, Senate Democrats, unable to stop any Republican-written bill with their own votes, have been holding news conferences and other events, making their opposition known. Today, they focused on health care. Here's Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat from Oregon, ranking member on the Finance Committee.
The legislation has rapidly become an anti-senior bill. And let me walk you through why that's the case. 1 million low-income seniors are going to see their Medicare premiums go up by nearly $200 a month. The bill makes nursing homes less safe for frail seniors because it rolls back safety standards. For example, Mehmet Oz somehow thinks that AI is going to take care of everything that seniors need in rest homes. We pointed out to him that's not going to help an 85-year-old who's up in the middle of the night and has to make the way to the bathroom. The bill's going to hurt hundreds of thousands of seniors by reducing services for those who count on Medicaid to lose care at home. And then the American people have heard some things about Medicaid in this bill and being so harmful. They're going to also learn that this bill would trigger $500 billion in Medicare cuts. This is going to hurt rural hospitals like a wrecking ball. Now, if you're an older person in America, this is also going to come on top of the Trump administration backing away from efforts to lower prescription drug costs. And we feel that this is a hugely big mistake. We work very hard to get the power to negotiate more affordable medicine for seniors. And all these cuts in senior programs that I've mentioned, they come on top of the Trump message to seniors, we're not really much interested in holding down your costs of medicine. Now, as the leader touched on, the latest numbers from CBO released 2 hours ago make it clear that there are going to be more than $1 trillion in cuts to Americans' health care. And we do expect to hear later today that even more Americans are going to be losing their health insurance than the initial estimates from the Nonpartisan Budget Office have disclosed.
Senator Ron Wyden, Democrat of Oregon, ranking member on the Finance Committee, at a news conference with other Senate Democrats. He referred to the leader, that's the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York. This is Washington Today. The Senate advanced today the nomination of Michelle Bowman to be Federal Reserve Vice Chair for Supervision, the second highest Fed officer. It was a party line vote, 51-46. Confirmation vote expected tonight. Before the vote, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, the Banking Committee ranking member, spoke on the floor.
Governor Bowman has served on the Federal Reserve Board since 2018, when she was confirmed as the first governor required to have community bank experience. But during her tenure, she has consistently prioritized Wall Street over Main Street. She has weakened safeguards on the largest banks in the country and has opposed common sense rules to promote financial stability, to protect consumers, and to drive investment in communities across this country. And just yesterday, in another Wall Street giveaway, she voted to lift the asset cap that was placed on Wells Fargo in an effort to rein in Wells's decades-long track record of customer abuses. She did this despite the fact that there is no public evidence that Wells Fargo has substantially changed its approach to banking. Now, Governor Bowman's actions have already imposed serious costs on small businesses and families. It would be especially dangerous to put her in charge of further deregulating Wall Street now, just as President Trump has pushed the economy to the edge of a cliff. Democrats on the Banking Committee unanimously opposed her nomination as vice chair for supervision. And I urge all of my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, to do the same now.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, the Banking Committee ranking member on the Senate floor today before the Senate did pass the procedural vote on the Michelle Bowman nomination. Confirmation vote expected tonight. No Republicans spoke before that procedural vote. Here is Michelle Bowman at her confirmation hearing before the Banking Committee in April, talking about her qualifications and priorities.
My background as a community banker, as the Kansas State Bank Commissioner, and more than 6 years of experience as a member of the board and the FOMC has thoroughly prepared me to carry out the responsibilities of the Vice Chair for Supervision. During my tenure, I have served as the Oversight Governor for the Division of Consumer and Community Affairs, Chair of the Smaller Regional and Community Banking Subcommittee, member of the Payments Committee, and currently as Chair of the Committee on Supervision and Regulation. In all of my roles, I have worked to ensure the safety and soundness and fairness of the financial system to support a strong economy. If confirmed, I will prioritize reforming and refocusing supervision, restoring regulatory tailoring, ensuring a viable path for innovation in the banking system, and promoting transparency and accountability.
Michelle Bowman before the Senate Banking Committee back in April. Today, the Senate did vote to advance her nomination towards final passage. It was a party line vote, 51-46. Again, the confirmation vote expected tonight. Fox Business has an article. President Donald Trump on Wednesday called on Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell to lower interest rates after ADP reported weak jobs data. ADP number out. Too late. Powell must now lower the rate. He is unbelievable. Europe has lowered 9 times. Trump wrote in a post on Truth Social. Companies in the private sector added just 37,000 jobs in May. Payroll processing firm ADP said Wednesday. That was from Fox Business. The Labor Department's jobs report, the official one for May, comes out on Friday. Wall Street today, the Dow down 91, NASDAQ up 61, S&P up a fraction. Most steel and aluminum imports to the U.S. are now subject to a 50% tariff. United Kingdom will stay at 25%, while details of a trade deal with the U.S. are worked out. That all according to a proclamation signed by President Trump on Tuesday using the powers of Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, which allows the president to address national security concerns by limiting imports in critical industries. President Trump's extensive use of tariffs was the subject today of a Senate hearing with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. These questions from Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana.
If Vietnam, for example, came to you tomorrow and said, okay, Mr. Secretary, you win. We're going to remove all tariffs and all trade barriers. Would the United States please do the same? Would you accept that deal?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. That would be the silliest thing we could do.
Why is that?
Vietnam has a $125 billion exports to us and imports from us $12.5 million. And you're thinking, Vietnam exports $125 billion?
I'm aware of the figures, but tell me.
But where do they get it from? They buy $90 billion from China, then they mark it up and send it to us.
So they're
just a pathway of China to us.
You wouldn't accept that deal?
No, it's a terrible deal. We're the one with money. We're the one with the store. Of course they want us to take down.
What's the purpose of reciprocity then? Is reciprocity not one of your goals? Are you telling the president that we shouldn't seek reciprocity? If that's what you're telling him, why are you trying to do these trade deals?
What do we want? We want to encourage Vietnam to produce products they're great at producing.
But I want to get back to reciprocity. You just said you don't believe in you don't accept reciprocity as a goal. What are you negotiating in these trade deals?
Why would we open our bank account and their bank account when ours is 10 times bigger?
Why are you negotiating trade deals? You're trying to get other countries to lower their tariffs and trade barriers in return for us lowering ours.
That's true for the things that they'll take from us.
That's called reciprocity.
Of course.
Well, so are you or are you not seeking reciprocity in these trade deals?
We are absolutely seeking reciprocity with respect to things that can be reciprocal.
But you just said
but when they're importing from China and sending it to us, they're not.
You just said that if a country came to you and offered you the ultimate reciprocity, no tariffs, no trade barriers, in return for us doing the same, you would reject that.
Of course, because they buy from China and send it to us. Don't you agree with me?
Suppose they said we won't buy from China.
Now we're talking. If it was Vietnam,
would you accept that deal?
We would consider it. For what things? For
what
products?
What would you want to change?
Well, there are certain products we want to reshore. We don't want other people making them. We want to make pharmaceuticals here.
Right.
We need to protect ourselves for certain
Let me ask you this.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, questioned by Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana, at a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee hearing that also covered the president's fiscal year 2026 budget request for the Commerce Department. Politico writing about Senator Kennedy's line of questioning to the Commerce Secretary. Kennedy then pressed Lutnick on a legal principle that holds the executive branch should defer to Congress when it comes to enacting major policy changes, known as the Major Questions Doctrine. It could be a deciding factor in multiple lawsuits challenging the Trump administration's ability to unilaterally impose tariffs, a power the Constitution grants to Congress. The issue is likely to be decided by the Supreme Court. Lutnick said he was unfamiliar with the principle. Kennedy said in an interview outside the hearing room that he was disturbed by that response. He said, he just lost in court, and it's a central part of the decision, and it's really going to impact trade policy. That was from Politico. As mentioned earlier, Great Britain is temporarily exempt from President Trump's increase in tariffs on steel and aluminum, which takes effect today. Under the president's order, most countries it goes up 25% to 50%, but for Great Britain, it's still at 25%, while the details of a trade negotiation are worked out. During Prime Minister's question time in the House of Commons in London today, Liberal Party leader Ed Davey asked the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, head of the Labour Party, about what the future holds.
Can I recognise the efforts of the Prime Minister to pull out all the stops to avoid President Trump's damaging tariffs? A letter from the King offering to water down online safety laws, even trying to send the Open to one of Trump's golf courses. The Prime Minister thought he'd secured 0% tariffs for British steel, but now Trump is threatening us with 50% unless we comply with his new 5-week deadline. Mr. Speaker, this is classic Trump, changing the terms of the deal he had already agreed. Does the Prime Minister share my fear that nothing will stop Trump messing the UK around, short of bunging a few £100 million into his Trump coin?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have a deal, we're implementing it, and within a very short time I'm very confident we will get those tariffs down in accordance with the deal. And I'll come back to him and update the House in due course, and I think the House will be very pleased at the outcome of that. But because of the approach... No, wait. This is zero tariffs on steel, and he says, no, they wouldn't. Well, let's come back to this in just a couple of weeks when we've implemented it. But they obviously don't want this. We back steel, Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House. They laugh at attempts to back steel on their side of the House, and that's a big part of the problem.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I had hoped the Prime Minister would be now beginning to see the sort of man that Trump is and start getting tough on him. So we will come back to this issue.
Ed Davey leads the Liberal Democratic Party in Great Britain, questioning the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, head of the Labour Party, during Prime Minister's Question Time in the House of Commons in London today. This is Washington today, and back in the U.S., this article from The Hill, Congresswoman Summer Lee, Democrat of Pennsylvania, sharply questioned Education Secretary Linda McMahon during a Wednesday House hearing about the department's actions against diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, alleging the federal agency is taking its lead from Jim Crow. Lee specifically criticized the Department of Education's letter in April telling schools they needed to sign a certification saying they were DEI-free or risk losing federal funding. That was from the article from thehill.com. Here's part of the Q&A between the Congresswoman and the Secretary at today's House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing.
I have a few other examples that I would like your thoughts on, simple yes or no. If this is a legal DEI, an example, would you say that it would be an illegal DEI for a lesson plan on the Tulsa Race Massacre?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Do you know what the Tulsa Race Massacre is?
I'd like to look into it more and get back to you on it.
Okay, so I look forward to that. How about the book Through My Eyes by Ruby Bridges, for instance?
I haven't read that.
Have you learned about Ruby Bridges?
If you have specific examples you'd like
that was a specific example.
I'll be very happy.
It was an incredibly specific example. I named a specific
your questions, and I will look into it and get back to you on them.
Thank you. How about a school having a voluntary celebration for Pride Month?
Well, I think that
voluntary.
Well, let's make sure that in our schools,
this is yes or no?
We're looking. No, it's not.
Okay. How about social studies standards that teach that President Biden won the 2020 election?
I think our studies should all be taught accurately.
Yes or no?
I think our studies should be taught accurately.
The question was, do you believe that social studies standards that teach that President Biden won the 2020 election is an illegal DEI? Yes or no?
I think I have said we should teach accurately. We should.
No, you have not answered the question. Well, I don't understand why you're incapable of answering.
I'm just not giving you the answer you want.
No, I want the answer, whatever your answer is.
I just gave you the answer.
No, the answer is yes or no.
No, the answer is
the answer is yes or no.
Gentleladies,
thank you so much. I yield back.
Expired.
Questions from Congresswoman Summer Lee, Democrat of Pennsylvania, to Education Secretary Linda McMahon at today's hearing. Congresswoman Mary Miller, Republican of Illinois, asked the Secretary about Title IX of the 1972 education law that bars discrimination in education based on sex. The Trump administration is reversing the Biden administration rule interpreting Title IX to include gender identity.
Madam Secretary, thank you for your recent response to my letters addressing Title IX violations in Dearborn and Naperville, Illinois. Could you please elaborate on what the Department of Education is doing to investigate similar violations in other school districts and whether their federal funding will be rescinded for failing to comply with federal law?
Thank you very much. And we are indeed investigating many cases that come up under Title IX. I was informed, I think it was yesterday, that in Colorado, there was as part of the public school system on school trips, that there were boys who were identifying as girls sleeping in the same bed with girls on these class trips, and parents were not even notified. I just think that that's incredibly wrong. That is a Title IX violation that we'll be, investigating. There is I think there's in Wyoming a college, that had, again, boys joining girls' sororities. Again, Title IX violations. We are going to investigate them, and we will look at whatever options, that we have available, whether it is defunding some of those programs. So, yes.
Education Secretary Linda McMahon at a House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing about the Education Department proposed budget for fiscal year 2026 at $66.7 billion, 15% lower than the current year. Those questions from Congresswoman Mary Miller, Republican from Illinois. The acting Federal Aviation Administration Administrator, Chris Rocheleau, testified before another House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing today on his agency's request for fiscal year 2026. It's $22 billion, with a focus on national airspace system safety and modernization, including hiring 2,500 more air traffic controllers and increasing their starting salaries by 30%. The House passed version of the budget reconciliation bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill, also has $12.5 billion to start the promised rebuild of the air traffic control system in the United States. Congressman Hal Rogers, Republican of Kentucky, asked the witness, the FAA acting administrator, Chris Rocheleau, about how this massive undertaking will take place. Radar, software, hardware, telecom networks, thousands of sites across the country.
How are you going to do this? Are we going to build a new system separate and apart from the present system? And one day when you get the new one built, you'll switch to on and the other one to off? How's that going to work?
Thank you for the question. And there is no doubt we are looking for a real investment in this. And I believe it is a true investment in the U.S. and the future. When I think of the aviation industry as an economic generator of over $1 trillion and 10 million U.S. Good-paying jobs, as it relates specifically to our plan that you so well outlined, part of that a big piece of that is being able to sustain the operations we have today. As I can talk a little bit about Newark, where we're transitioning from the copper wires, what with the old-fashioned telephone lines, over to fiber optic cables. That's just one example of where we're taking kind of what we have in place and we're transitioning into a new system. As it relates to radars and facilities, all of those things are going to be part of this, where we continue to operate the system safely every day, and then we switch over, as you described, we switch over into these new modern systems with intentional, deliberate testing to make sure the redundancy and the resiliency is there to ensure the safety of the traveling public.
Will you be using some equipment under the current
I'm sorry, what equipment?
Will you be mixing in pieces from the new system to the old system and vice versa?
So the whole idea is to replace the system. That is but that is going to take some time to get there. And I think yesterday we issued a request for information for the best and brightest companies to come in and help us do that transition. I think that's a real opportunity for us to understand. But the plan, as we described it earlier, is to essentially continue to operate the system as we do today, and then switch over to the new technologies.
So it will be all new equipment,
yes, sir,
supplies and the like in
That's
the
correct.
new system. None of the old.
No more floppy disks or paper strips.
So you'll turn the switch to on and take the shovels and do away with the old system?
It's a little more complicated than that, but we will switch it over to the new system.
Oh, all right. Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Congressman Hal Rogers, Republican of Kentucky, with the FAA Acting Administrator Chris Rocheleau at a House Appropriations Subcommittee hearing. Many members of Congress fly back to their home districts on weekends and during weeks when Congress is out of session, and the nearest airport to Capitol Hill is just across the Potomac River in Virginia. And Congressman David Joyce, Republican of Ohio, asked the acting administrator about improving service there.
All of us here are among those who travel through DCA on a pretty regular basis, and we wait at DCA, as with most of the traveling public does for reasons unbeknownst to us. But can you share with the committee any specific steps that's being taken to improve the operational performance at DCA, particularly during these peak travel periods?
Yes, sir. So there's a handful of ways we've tackled that. First and foremost, after the tragic collision, we cleared that airspace. We made it less complex by removing the helicopter traffic. So first and foremost, that really did contribute to the ability for the controllers to manage air traffic in a safer, more efficient manner. Second, we focused on specifically the controllers themselves. So we had an authorized rate at staffing at 28. We're now at 30, and we're going to 31. So we've prioritized hiring for DCA traffic specifically and getting people up to speed there. And then we work with the carriers. At the end of the day, you have to work with the airports and you have to work with the airlines to make sure that as we have traffic surges, that we're able to spread that out throughout the day to make sure there aren't these peaks which kind of contribute to delays themselves and add workload to the controllers.
And having sat on the runway, because we missed our slot because we were a little late taking off, we can't get into DCA is an issue as well, I understand.
Congressman David Joyce, Republican of Ohio, questioning the FAA Acting Administrator Chris Rocheleau at a House Appropriations Subcommittee. The administrator mentioned the deadly collision in January between an Army Black Hawk helicopter and American Airlines passenger jet that killed 67 people. He also said that the U.S. Army helicopter flights around the Pentagon remain suspended after 2 passenger airline flights were forced to abort landings on May 1st at Reagan-Washington National Airport because of a nearby Black Hawk helicopter. Washington Today continues in a moment.
In a nation divided, a rare moment of unity. This fall, C-SPAN presents Ceasefire, where the shouting stops and the conversation begins. In a town where partisan fighting prevails. One table, 2 leaders, 1 goal, to find common ground. This fall, Ceasefire, on the network that doesn't take sides, only on C-SPAN.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. President Donald Trump posting on his Truth Social account today, "I just finished speaking by telephone with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. The call lasted approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. We discussed the attack on Russia's docked airplanes by Ukraine and also various other attacks that have been taking place by both sides. It was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace." President Putin did say, though, very strongly that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields. Part of the post from the president, he also said that he spoke to President Putin about nuclear talks with Iran, and President Putin suggested that he take part in them as well. So, story from the Washington Examiner. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is en route to Brussels, Belgium, where NATO defense ministers are gathering in what will be their last meeting before the big leaders summit at The Hague next month. But for the first time since the U.S. created what became known as the Ramstein Group of some 50 nations contributing to Ukraine's defense, there will be no U.S. Defense Secretary in attendance at today's meeting. With no additional aid to announce, Hegseth has decided to skip the meeting, which the UK and Germany will chair. Instead, he plans to deliver his standard lecture to NATO allies at tomorrow's session, urging them to spend more on their defense and stop relying so much on Washington as the U.S. pivots to the Indo-Pacific as its main priority. That was from the Washington Examiner article. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, at a news conference today at NATO in Brussels, asked about Secretary Hegseth's absence.
You say that you're all committed, but for the first time since this format started, the U.S. Defense Secretary is going to skip the contact group. What does that say about U.S. Commitment to Ukraine? And haven't they gone completely AWOL on supporting Ukraine?
This is
Pete Hegseth's second visit to Brussels since he became Secretary of State for Defense of the United States, which happened in January. He will be here for the second time this year, participating in the meeting tomorrow. The U.S. will be present today in the UDCG. The U.S. is completely committed to NATO, completely committed to our joint endeavors when it comes to Ukraine. There's no reason to doubt that. And whether someone is participating, yes or no, in each meeting, let's not forget, these meetings take place most of the times in Europe, so it will not always be possible for U.S. officials to participate in every meeting.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte at a news conference, NATO headquarters in Brussels, during the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting. Story from ABC News. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told journalists on Wednesday that Tuesday's explosion at the Kerch Strait Bridge caused no damage after the security service of Ukraine claimed responsibility for the latest attack on the structure. The Kerch Bridge was built by Russia to connect to Crimea after Russia seized Crimea from Ukraine in 2014. From Associated Press, the United States on Wednesday vetoed a UN Security Council resolution demanding an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza because it was not linked to the release of hostages. The resolution before the UN's most powerful body also did not condemn Hamas's deadly attack in Israel on October 7, 2023, which ignited the war, or say the militant group must disarm and withdraw from Gaza, two other U.S. demands. The 14 other members of the 15-nation council voted in favor of the resolution, which described the humanitarian situation in Gaza as catastrophic and called on Israel to lift all restrictions on the delivery of aid to the 2.1 million Palestinians in the territory. Associated Press with that article. Here's Dorothy Camille Shea, U.S. Deputy Ambassador to the UN, at today's Security Council meeting.
The U.S. opposition to this resolution should come as no surprise. It is unacceptable for what it does say. It is unacceptable for what it does not say. And it is unacceptable for the manner in which it has been advanced. The United States has been clear. We would not support any measure that fails to condemn Hamas and does not call for Hamas to disarm and leave Gaza. In recent months, Hamas has rejected numerous ceasefire proposals, including one over the weekend, that would provide a pathway to end this conflict and release the remaining 58 hostages. We cannot allow the Security Council to reward Hamas's intransigence. After all, it was Hamas who started this brutal conflict on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas perpetrated the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. Hamas has sustained it ever since in a manner that threatens Israel's security and prolongs Palestinian anguish. It is Hamas that continues to threaten Israelis and puts Palestinian civilians in Gaza in harm's way every day, using them as human shields. They have brutally suppressed those brave enough to challenge its despotic rule. It is inexplicable that many members of this council still refuse to acknowledge that Hamas could end this conflict tomorrow by surrendering and laying down its arms.
Dorothy Camille Shea is the Deputy U.S. Ambassador to the UN at today's UN Security Council meeting in New York City before she vetoed the latest Gaza war ceasefire resolution. The other 14 members of the council voting yes, but the U.S., as one of 5 permanent members, when it votes no, it counts as a veto. It's a story from USA Today. A Gaza Aid group backed by the Trump administration is on the ropes after dozens of Palestinians were shot dead while trying to collect food from its militarized checkpoints, humanitarian officials said. The group temporarily paused operations on June 4th and said it was talking to Israel's military about safeguarding civilians after a hospital reported the recent death of at least 48 people trying to reach an aid site. The new Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has denied anyone was injured, let alone killed, at the aid site since they started operations on May 26th, but shooting deaths and injuries have mounted among masses of Palestinians walking to the foundation's distribution points. Reporting from USA Today. 10 days until the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary parade through Washington, D.C. That's also President Donald Trump's birthday. NBC News reports the Army estimates the cost at $45 million, including up to $16 million to repair D.C. roads damaged by tanks and other heavy military vehicles. The Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, and the Army Secretary, Daniel Driscoll, got questions about this at a House hearing today. Here's Congressman Seth Moulton, Democrat of Massachusetts.
General George, on to the birthday parade where you're going to have 24 main battle tanks and 48 armored vehicles rolling down Pennsylvania Avenue as if it were North Korea, Russia, or China. What is the total cost to the unit at Fort Caraves of moving these vehicles to and from D.C. for the parade?
Congressman, I don't know the specific cost of that one movement.
Well, I guess the total cost
right
is about
now
$35 million. So would it be safe to say about $10 million just for that movement?
I would hesitate to give you an exact number of what that movement cost. I mean, we have, I think, been very public in what it is that we expect the parade to cost overall. We are looking forward to our Army birthday next year.
Have you included damage to D.C. roads in that estimate?
We have put out an estimate of what we think everything will cost Congress.
Secretary Driscoll, you said in your opening statement that it is your responsibility to ensure that every dollar the Army receives contributes to defending this nation and for us all. How does the parade contribute to defending the nation?
Congressman, we think it's an incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to expand our recruiting pool and tell the amazing story of the United States Army and the impact that it's had on the lives of Americans.
Gentleman's time's expired.
From today's House Armed Services Committee hearing, Congressman Seth Moulton, Democrat of Massachusetts, questioning the witnesses, the Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, and the Army Secretary, Daniel Driscoll. That parade through Washington, D.C., scheduled for June 14th. Congressman Pat Harrigan, Republican of North Carolina, has an op-ed at The Hill today. For decades, America's Army has been trapped in a cycle of spending billions of taxpayer dollars on outdated systems before they even reach the battlefield. While our soldiers stand ready to defend this country, they are often equipped with technology that belongs in a museum. The Army Transformation Initiative aims to break this cycle, ensuring that every dollar we spend protects the men and women who wear the uniform. That's the opening of the op-ed from Congressman Harrigan. Back to the hearing in the Armed Services Committee, Congressman Mike Rogers, Republican of Alabama, the committee chair, asked about that initiative.
The committee is willing to work with you on ATI, but we need to see your math. When can we expect the full details of exactly what you're proposing?
The way that we envision ATI and how we have described it throughout the formations is this will be an iterative process. And so there will be no one date where everything with our first batch of ATI will be completed. We will be hopefully doing what the best companies in America do and learning as we go. The very first batch of cuts that General George has referenced, where we are pushing our soldiers back out to the formations, those are in process. When we are looking at the assets that we have and what we are buying and where we don't want it. We have started to work with those companies who are providing things to empower them with the information about what we do want. So a lot of that's in process. When we're looking at our depots and where we are manufacturing things in our organic industrial base, we have just started that process of putting together the plans for what could be the right solution. But our commitment is that we will share it as soon as we have reasonable drafts with this committee to take your feedback to help make it stronger and better.
So will it be reflected in the president's FY26 budget?
Many of the cuts and the lack of requests for obsolete equipment will be reflected in that budget.
Okay. Do you expect to cancel any programs for which the money was in the FY25 CR?
We are not doing that right now, Congressman. We have been in the process of going back through with businesses things that we are doing right now. But as the Secretary mentioned, looking forward, there are several examples, and I know we've been over, and we're happy to come over and brief everyone on what we're doing with the transformation initiative in detail. But these are systems that I think we've long talked about that we know we don't need in our formation and are not going to help us win on the battlefield, and we can go down those in detail.
But those aren't in the FY25 CR then, the things that you're thinking about?
To my knowledge, Chairman, there's nothing that's in there. I mean, we just had a conversation, everything that we've, I'll give you one example. We don't want to buy Humvees, and we haven't asked to buy Humvees, but that was in our budget. And we're obviously continuing with FY25 because that's what we were directed to do with our budget.
The only reason I ask these questions, I just worry about you being locked in. If whatever you're wanting to do is not in the FY26 budget, then you may have some constraints that are unnecessary.
Congressman Mike Rogers, Republican of Alabama, the Armed Services Committee chair, questioning the witnesses at today's hearing, Army Chief of Staff General Randy George and Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll. Story from the Army Times. The Army has met its fiscal 2025 recruiting goal 4 months early, signing 61,000 contracts for new active duty soldiers, officials announced Tuesday. The goal was 10% higher than the 55,000 recruits the Army sought last year. From South China Morning Post, China has lodged a protest about U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's comments about the 1989 Tiananmen Square crackdown. These remarks maliciously distort historical facts, attack China's political system and development path, and interfere in China's internal affairs, Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Zhan told a regular press briefing on Wednesday. He added that China was strongly dissatisfied with and firmly opposed Rubio's comments, criticizing the Communist Party's crackdown on pro-democracy protests, and had lodged solemn representations with the U.S. side. In a statement published on the State Department's website and on social media, Rubio said the Tiananmen protesters' courage in the face of certain danger reminds us that the principles of freedom, democracy, and self-rule are not just American principles. They are human principles the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, cannot erase. Reporting from the South China Morning Post, Congresswoman Young Kim, Republican of California, was interviewed on NTD News today about the anniversary.
36 years ago, we had freedom-loving pro-democracy students protesting in the Tiananmen Square, calling for freedom, democracy, and human rights. But what they were met with was the brutal military attack by the CCP and arresting them in hundreds and hundreds of people, taking their lives. It really showed what CCP is capable of. 36 years later today, it has not improved. In fact, CCP has continued to suppress its own people. There is massive surveillance. There is censorship. They commit genocide against ethnic minorities in China, like Uyghur population, Uyghur Muslims specifically, and also they persecute Falun Gong practitioners. They even put Hong Kong pro-democracy protesters in jail. I mean, if they can do that to their own people, I wonder what they can do to us, which is why freedom-loving countries like in the United States, which value and put high premium on human rights, we need to remember what happened 36 years ago and continue to call out Xi Jinping and its Chinese Communist Party for suppressing its own people's rights, freedom of speech, and freedom of assembly.
Congresswoman Young Kim, Republican of California, today on NTD News. She's a member of the House Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party. Article from Reuters: ahead of the anniversary, security around Tiananmen Square in Beijing was tightened with increased police presence. Police officers set up multiple checkpoints for identification checks on motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians, and also prevented people from taking photographs near the square. Commemorations in Hong Kong, which once drew tens of thousands of people annually, have been shut down since a new security law took effect in 2020. That was from Reuters. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word. We'll send you the stories making headlines in Washington every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.